Imagine the board meeting. You are trying to understand the margin at your last contract. And for example, sales can say that the result was pretty great. It was at 12%. But the perspective from the operations could say it was a barely 6%. And the finance will summarize the corrective invoices, empty runs, and additional costs, and they will say that was a maybe 2%. And the most interesting part is that nobody is lying. The worst part is that something else. The management decision that follows doesn't depend which number is true. It depends on who spoke the last, who has a more influence, and whose report was opened before the meeting. Today I will show you why does it happen, why it is not an IT problem, and what to do before spending a simple dollar on another system. We will break the problem into the 3 different perspectives. So, let's see the episode.
The channel's partner is Go Mobility Tech, a place where we build competitive advantage in the TSL industry. We conduct strategic workshops for transport and logistics companies, combining an understanding of your operations with knowledge of current technological capabilities, including AI. Book a free consultation to see if we can help your company. Click the link in the description.
If you are first time here, 2 quick sentences. My name is Wiktor Sobczyk, and for the more than decade I work in the transport and supply chain. On the side of the table, responsible for stitching together that falls apart between systems, between spreadsheets, between inboxes. In practice, it always comes down to the 3 things: predictable process, dedicated systems, and the ROI that actually makes sense. That's why Go Mobility Tech exists. Technology consulting for transport, forwarding, and logistic companies. Now, let's back to these 3 numbers. When you are in this situation, the first reaction is the same. We need a better reporting, the better dashboards, for example. And that's exactly the wrong diagnosis. You don't have a shortage of the data, you have too much of it. The problem is that the multiple versions of the same truth exist in the same time, and every one of them is true. But the problem begins when decisions are based on who was in the room, and their version becomes the ultimate truth. That brings us to the core idea. This is not the problem of IT. IT can bring you the more reports, more dashboard, more screens, but only gives you the more witnesses. And more witnesses not create the same agreement. Agreement comes from deciding what is the truth, who defines it, and when it gets measured. Everyone uses a different system. Sales works on the CRM, dispatch works on the TMS, and finance works on the ERP. And for example, warehouse can use a WMS system. And sitting between them in the person, copying data from one system to another. This is the same human interface that I talked about in the previous episode. The systems do not communicate each other, so people do it. But now we see another problem. Every system starts telling a slightly different story. Something was rounded, something was updated a day later, something was corrected in one place but not in the another. And suddenly, the same number exists in the 3 different versions. None of them are complete. Imagine inventory. For example, the shelf says one thing, ERP says something else because the latest delivery hasn't been booked yet. Sales sell the inventory that physically no longer exists, or block inventory is not actually available. It works at a small scale. One person can keep all versions in their head and reconcile them. But when the company grows, there are too many versions of the same truth. And the person who knew everything leaves your company. And suddenly you have 3 different systems, 3 different sources, 3 different truths, and none of the single number you can confidently defend on the board meeting. Let's stop for the moment. Think about the last major decision that you made. And now answer honestly. Did anyone verify the number behind the decision came from? Or it was a simply guess, or it was a find in the report? The second reason is just as important. Operations have a live data, but the finance sees the data after a month after the close. It is the same metric, but with a different timestamp. And when the timestamp is different, the number will be different. Take a look on the margin. On departure day, it looked fantastic. Then it comes some changes. For example, the weight corrections, the additional fees, the corrected invoices, and suddenly the same margin looks completely different. Operations saw the profitable shipment, but finance eventually see that it's truly cost. This creates a very practical problem. Decisions are made using today's numbers, but often based on the data from the last month. Let's check the different perspective. The last. This is the most dangerous reason, because it is invisible. Everyone uses the same words, but means completely different. Take for example the word of the margin. For sales, it means revenue minus transport purchase cost. But for finance, it means what remains after every additional cost. Indirect cost, correction, adjustment. You see, the same word, different definition, different numbers. Because the problem is not the data quality, the problem is a different definition. So let's return to the beginning. 12%, 6%, or 2%. Now we know why the numbers don't match. Because nobody lied. Everyone prepared properly. Everyone told the truth. They simply stood in the different places, looked at the different moments, and spoke different languages. But the real cause is not the numbers differ. The real cause appears when you need to choose one of them. Because if there is no single version of truth, the winning numbers belong to the person with the highest authority. Not because anyone won politics, but because the system provides no other referee. The problem is usually not a lack of the data. The problem is too many versions of truth. So if this exercise reveals the more version of truth that you expected, that is exactly what we help companies solve at the Go Mobility Tech. We sit down with your team, break down the process apart, define the ownership, define the measurement timing, and only then discuss automation, because automating chaos does not eliminate chaos, it accelerates it. If that's what I described during this episode makes sense, let's take a look at the link in the description. And this was Wiktor Sobczyk, Go Mobility Tech. See you in the next episode.